Hello and welcome back to Psychology 303, the analysis of everyday behavior. Today we'll be talking about the material in Chapter 10, specifically prompting and fading. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about stimulus control because we use prompting and fading when typical stimulus control doesn't seem to work. So sometimes discrimination training isn't enough. Natural discriminative stimuli just don't control a client's behavior. And some individuals might need more assistance in bringing their behavior under the control of certain stimuli. So we add prompts to help ensure that the behavior will successfully occur. But one of the downsides of prompting is that prompts may need to be faded later. There are 5 basic steps to prompting. We're going to present the stimulus. So we present our discriminative stimulus, then we pause and we wait to see whether or not the discriminative stimulus can produce the behavior on its own. If it doesn't, then we add the prompt in, and then we wait for the behavior to occur. And when it does occur, we then praise and reinforce the behavior. There are several different types of prompts. There are verbal and gestural prompts. There's modeling prompts and physical prompts and even stimulus prompts. And in order to give you an exposure to prompting in general, I have a series of videos I'd like you to look at. So please, at this point, pause the PowerPoint lecture and go to the assignments folder, and under lecture videos, I'd like you to watch 10B, 10C, 10D, and 10E. 4 videos, 3 of which are very short. The last one, types of prompts, is a little bit longer. It's about 15 minutes. And then when you're finished, you can come back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about 2 main prompting strategies in a little bit more detail. So the increasing assistance model and the decreasing assistance model, both of which include a range of prompts from the least level of prompting to the most intrusive. So let's talk a little bit about the increasing assistance model. The least amount of prompting is used in this method. We start with the smallest amount of prompting possible, and we only move up if the individual is unable to complete the behavior without additional prompting. So here's an example, teaching toothbrushing to children who have intellectual challenges or mental retardation issues. And so we start with very simple indirect prompts. I would walk the child into the bathroom and walk up to the sink, and then I would say something like, "What's next?" And I would wait to see what happens, whether the child actually picks up the toothbrush or the toothpaste and starts the process. If not, I might give a more direct verbal prompt, like pick up your toothbrush. And then I would follow that again with what's next to see if they're able to. I would always step back down to see if I can, with each step in the process, I would always go back to the beginning and increase only as needed. If verbal prompting, indirect prompting, and verbal prompting don't seem to be working, then I can move up to more intrusive prompting like modeling, where I would have my own toothbrush and my own toothpaste, and I would engage in the behavior myself and then say, "You do it," and see if they're able to use imitation. If that doesn't work, then shadowing or more physical guidance might be necessary. We typically use this method most frequently with higher functioning individuals, people who are more likely to engage in behaviors with those lower levels of prompts. Okay, so let's talk about the decreasing assistance model. With the decreasing assistance model, I'm going to use the maximum amount of prompting initially, and then I'll gradually decrease it over time. This is typically used with people who have more difficulty with the behavior, people who are maybe lower functioning. So for example, teaching someone to use their fork at the table. I might start by using physical guidance to hand over hand, have the individual pick up the fork and start to eat with the fork. And then gradually I might let go of their hand sooner and sooner, and slowly move away from the physical prompt, and then move into maybe a modeling prompt where I would sit next to them and say, "See, like me, you do this," and then see if they can do it. Then I would eliminate my modeling and move to more direct verbal prompts and maybe pointing or tapping the stimulus I want them to pick up. I might then remove those pointing prompts and use just physical prompts alone, and then finally just use verbal prompts, and then finally just using a gesture where I point from sitting at another place at the table, simply point at the fork and see if they pick it up. Typically used more frequently with lower functioning individuals. When you start out with a higher level of prompting, it takes longer to fade those prompts out. So this is a more intense process, and it's certainly a more protracted process. It takes longer to get them to be independent with these behaviors. So if we want to increase prompt efficacy, if we want to make prompts really efficient, there are two ways. One is to use within stimulus prompts. So we use a stimulus whenever, a within stimulus prompt whenever we can, because the prompts actually share features with the goal stimulus. So, for example, here on the right-hand side, there's a picture of a sink faucet, and we have caps that go over the hot and cold, and they're color-coded. And slowly, these might be removed or reduced, and you can also get caps for the top of the faucet that are red and blue, or they might be red and blue letters like hot and cold. And so you slowly can move back to the natural contingencies. They may pick up that left is hot and right is cold, but if not, as long as you have colors associated with hot and cold on the top of the faucets, then you can ultimately move toward that direction so that they cue into the colors on top. It's very effective for transfer of stimulus control because they're already attending to the important features of the natural stimulus. Now, you can use extra stimulus prompts as well. They can help, but they don't typically share any features associated with the goal stimulus. They're more artificial. So here on the right, we have what looks like a rental contract, and someone has taken a stimulus prompt and an extra stimulus prompt that says sign here and attached it pointing at the line. And there's nothing about that arrow or the words sign here that are on the naturally occurring contract. And so these are more artificial. It results in more steps in trying to transfer control from one stimulus to another because they don't have a lot of similar items. For example, one way I might do this is make the line that they're supposed to sign in on red, and then gradually change the color deeper and deeper and deeper until it finally turns black. That might help. So trying to make the natural stimulus look a little bit more like the extra stimulus prompt, and then ultimately changing that to just a line. All right. There are limitations to prompting. If you introduce prompts, you may need to fade them out later. For some individuals, we don't need to fade them out. For other individuals, we ideally want them to fade them out. And it takes effort. It takes effort to develop and use your prompts. It's labor intensive, and it takes time to set up all the prompting. And then it's also time consuming to fade those prompts out. And stimulus control may not generalize to additional behaviors or other people or settings. So you may find that once you do get the behavior, you may have to train multiple exemplars before the behavior really becomes independent for that individual. I mean, imagine if you taught someone to brush their teeth with a blue toothbrush and then they couldn't use any other color. You might have to train many different colors of toothbrushes before they'd ever just be able to walk into a store and buy any old toothbrush. So prompting takes time and effort and work, and then fading the prompts takes time and effort and work as well. Fading, I've been using the words and I've been talking about it, and you have seen a little bit in the videos, but fading is the gradual elimination of a prompt, where we slowly remove a prompt by making it increasing delays, or by making it smaller and smaller, or more faded, or shifting gradually from one color to another. Transfer of control is that gradual elimination of a prompt and the gradual introduction of the natural SD. So as the artificial prompt is faded out, the natural SD is superimposed and faded in. And both are very similar to things like schedule thinning and shaping because the changes occur very gradually. So here's an example of what's often used in elementary school for learning how to write, print your letters. And so here you have the letter A. You have an actual photograph of an apple so that they make a connection between the word apple and A. And then you have them to draw the A. Here, I'm going to use my little cursor here for a minute. We would trace this stimulus, and then we would move over here and begin tracing the faded version. And this one even tells you, it gives you, if you look closely, it gives you arrows for what direction your pencil should be moving. And so they practice that several times. They move down to the next line. Now you notice that the arrows are gone and just the A's are there, and now they're dotted lines. So you have to connect the dots. And then they repeat it with the lowercase a with arrows and solid lines for tracing, and then without arrows and dotted lines for tracing. And then they're allowed to go down and do all of them together. And hopefully at that point you can then move to just the example and a blank line, and they're able to draw all of them. So this is an example of prompting here and gradual fading of that prompt. Fading of prompts, often we use reversed gradual prompting. So if you've used more and more physical prompts, more and more prompts, then you're just going to work your way back down that hierarchy of prompting. So if you work all the way up to the most guidance, physical guidance, then, and you've gone from gesture alone to verbal prompts to direct verbal prompts and pointing to modeling to physical guidance. And now the reversed gradual prompting is to come back down that list. So we work our way down from physical guidance to modeling to direct verbal prompts and pointing to verbal prompts alone, and then simple gestures. We work our way down. Okay, so I would like you at this point, again, to pause the PowerPoint lecture and go back to the assignments folder, and under lecture videos for for Unit 6, I want you to go in and watch 10F, which is a very short video on a fading procedure used to help teach a child their phone number. So if you'll stop the video here, then we'll pick up for the last few pieces of this lecture. Okay, so that kind of explains how you would go about fading by taking pieces. That's another way to take just chunks of the stimulus out as you go. There's also time delay fading, which is also sometimes called the anticipation procedure, where you gradually increase the delay between the presentation of the natural stimulus and the introduction of your prompt. And you increase that delay until the natural prompt, the natural stimulus, elicits the desired behavior. It's very similar to the way we teach children, normally functioning, typically developing children, language, where we would hold up an apple and say apple, and then gradually we would insert a delay, and we would hold up the apple and maybe shake the apple. We might say, what is this? But we then increase the time delay before we start introducing our prompts to see whether or not they will spontaneously say apple. All right, so that's sort of the end of the lecture on prompting and fading, and I'll see you back for for the next series of lectures over, I believe it's chapter 12. Have a good day.